Hey everyone, welcome back to their hardware news recap for the week. In this one, Intel increases its GPU performance by 100 times with the driver update. It's a little bit more than we expected from the drivers, but it's also only in one specific area, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Additionally, the RTX 4090 gets some more leaks this time, 3D Mark numbers that allow us to compare it a little more directly to other cards on the market and get some ideas for where the performance will fall for the 40 series. Raptor Lake, or the 13th gen, has some leaks for performance and rumors for its launch date as well. And of course, we already know AMD Zen 4 should be launching probably in September from AMD's own event based in China that we reported on previously. And we'll also be talking about EK launching gold, coated liquid cooling parts, as an investment opportunity. Before that, this video is brought to you by Linode. We've used Linode for our own hosting for about a decade now, and I've loved working with them. With Linode, you can build your own VPN that you fully control. You can build a Pi-hole DNS sinkhole to improve your network performance, or you can use other tools like Owncast to self-host your own independent streaming platform away from major providers. You can get a $100 credit when you use our link in the description below. First up, just a quick GN update like we like to do. We've made a ton of strides recently. You may have seen our Thermal Grizzly contact frame coverage previously. Well, now we have a review coming up on the Thermal Right contact frame. It's $4.35 on AliExpress, and we have a review coming up for it that we spent a lot of time on. We also spent a lot of time on the recent Lian Li Landqual 3 review, and I'm really proud of the work that the whole team did on that one. The quality of the video is just going up and up lately. We already have the testing quality there, the accuracy, and the sort of engineering for the testing behind the scenes all in place and has been for a while, and now we're really ramping on the production of everything. So check it out if you haven't seen it, but we're doing these sort of alternating weeks right now where we do really heavy week and then lighter week, where heavy and light being related to publishing. So heavy week, we upload a lot of stuff or just big hitter content pieces like the Artesian one. And the lighter week, we're basically working on stuff for the following week. So we're gonna keep that cadence for a little bit, maybe a couple months here while we refine processes and advance our testing. We have some new equipment coming in that we're trying to learn how to use. And this has allowed me to take some time away from hosting and uploading stuff to focus my work time on learning how to use new things. Like the Fantaster, finally I've gotten back to it. It sat for a while I was just trying to keep up with the channel production. So anyway, that's kind of the cadence we're keeping right now. If you want to help us out, as always, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net. This shirt, the Cyber Skeleton foil shirt, we are almost through our pre-ordered quantities. We're just figuring out the sizing for everything as you place your pre-orders. So if you want to grab one, go to the store now, because we're not going to make another run of these, and these are basically directly funding what we do every day because we've increased the time we spend on videos substantially, and obviously the AdSense revenue doesn't keep pace, so we're able to do what we do because of Patreon, because of the store purchases, and it's awesome. I really like the quality we're at now, and I like that we're continuing to push it. So anyway, some cool stuff coming in. Okay, first major news story is Intel with its ray tracing performance. Intel managed to ship its Arc GPU with 1% of its total capable ray tracing performance. Meaning basically it didn't work. Well, actually literally it didn't work. But this was for Vulkan specifically, and Linux specifically. This is a story that Phoronix reported on, where a new driver update for Intel's Arc GPUs resulted in a 100x increase in the performance of Vulkan ray tracing results in Linux, and the improvement was a result of a memory mismanagement issue with the original drivers. Now, we have a lot of issues with the Intel Arc drivers just in Windows. That's not even getting into Linux, and it's clear Intel has a very large QA deficit where it either needs more people in QA or it needs better test engineering or a mix of them. But launching the product will certainly help it test a whole lot faster. It's just a question of whether they're going to be able to keep up on the development and fixing of the issues. We have our own video on driver problems coming up. That's focused on Windows. There's enough there for us to talk about without even getting into the quagmire of Linux, where apparently you can lose all of your performance in ray tracing due to a programming issue. Not a hardware issue, not anything complicated, just oops, lost all of the performance for ray tracing. This is obviously in territory where it's actually just completely unacceptable. It's not like a standard new GPU launch where the drivers are a little bit buggy, so you try to install it, it does things like shrink your screen down to 3-inch by 2-inch area, and it ends up being 480 by whatever the resolution aspect ratio would be. This is far worse than that because a whole feature was broken and somehow no one at Intel caught it. So at this point, before anyone goes there and calls this a fine wine situation, like the old AMD fine wine drivers claims that people used to like to make on Reddit mostly. Yes, I'm talking about you. And it's not Intel fine wine. Improving a liquid from actual poison to barely drinkable wine just makes it drinkable. It doesn't make it inherently good, nor does it mean that it will improve to a point. It's kind of like if the wine is going to take so long to become good that you'll be dead before you're able to drink it, that's kind of where we are right now. So Intel really has to pick up on the driver development. Again, we've had a lot of frustrations over the last week. This is following our A380 review, where we really tried to actually just use the drivers, like our control software and everything else bundled in with it, and it's been not a great experience. So anyway, it won't affect the Windows performance in our review, nor will this Linux 1% to 100x increase change, but it does sort of affect our opinion overall of ARC. Okay, next one. Rumors of the RTX 4090 series. So Copite 7 Kimi, the leaker, is back again, this time with another RTX 40 series leak regarding the RTX 4090's performance in 3D Mark, specifically for Time Spy Extreme, or TSE. And this tweet is extremely simple. It just says RTX 4090 TSE greater than 19,000. In the replies, Copite confirms that this is a graphics score rather than overall, and that the card will be using PCIe Gen 4. If we take that graphics score at face value, it calculates to 84% higher performance than the average RTX 3090 in the Time Spy Extreme results database, which is a score of 10,300. This is a slightly milder increase than the massive claims of earlier leaks, which ranged between 2x and 2.5x multiplier. This is, however, a much larger jump than Turing to Ampere, which, depending on how you chop it up, was 47% between the 2080 Ti, which was TU102, and the 3080, which is GA102. Of course, the performance increase isn't without a cost, both actual price cost probably and the power cost. From everything we know right now, speaking with power supply manufacturers and looking at leaks online, it sounds like the 40 series is going to consume more power overall. We'll see how the efficiency is, because there's still a performance per watt argument to be made. If both improve in step, then it hasn't changed the efficiency. But power consumption will be higher. And as for literal cost, we just don't know yet. But there are currently oversupply concerns and rumors of NVIDIA pushing back the 40 series because of oversupply of the 30 series, because, oops, we thought mining was going to happen forever, even though it's boomed and busted many times at this point, and it's just done it again. Next one is another rumor, this one on the Raptor Lake launch date. Raptor Lake is the Intel 13th gen of CPUs. These will be compatible in the 600 series motherboard, so Z690, things like that. And it's a potential slot-in upgrade from the 12 series. So the 13 series, this time, the leak is from Enthusiastic Citizen on Bilibili. And Enthusiastic Citizen, or ECSM, states that September 28th is the date for Intel's 2022 innovation event, where Z790 and the high-end K CPUs will be announced, and with the launch following the week of October 17th. So according to Enthusiastic Citizen, the H760 and B760 chipsets and the non-K CPUs will be announced at CES 2023 on January 5th, with release following in the second half of January. This particular aspect is not surprising and is what Intel's done a lot in the past. So the 8th gen and the 9th gen specifically both had an initial rollout for Z-series motherboards and basically 2, maybe 3 high-end CPUs that were all K SKUs. And then several months later, normally around CES, which is in January every year in Las Vegas, Intel launched the rest of its CPUs through its partners. So it looks like they're doing that again, where just the 13900K and the KF will come out first, maybe a 137, we'll see what else is with those. So far we know that there's a 13900K, that's in the i9 series. There's a 13900KF, These have 8 P cores and 16 E cores. That follows the existing sort of core layout for the 12 series. There's an i7 13700K in KF with 8 P cores and 8 E cores, so you get an E core reduction, probably a clock reduction. And there's an i5 13600K, which has a 6 P core, 8 E core layout. If that part is true, then for reference, this is a change of the i5 12600K, which ran 6 P cores and then 4 E cores instead of what is shown right now as 8 for the E core count. So that would be a change. As for the Z790 chipset, the post alleges that it will have 20 PCIe Gen 4 lanes and 8 PCIe Gen 3 lanes. And these are assignable to different things too, so it's not all just PCIe slots. These can be assigned to things like NVMe, 10 gigabit Ethernet, things like that. And the largest change is DDR5 support being allegedly upgraded from JEDEC 4800 to 5600. And of course, you can go beyond that with what they call overclocking, or what's often XMP. If this and the separate rumors about the Ryzen 7000 launch are true, that would put the launches roughly 1 month apart, with Ryzen coming first. And between all of the rumored CPU and GPU launches all landing right in the last part of the year, this should actually be a really fun season, at least for us, for testing reviews, for figuring out cool and new ways to evaluate CPUs and GPUs with how many are coming out and with how complex they're getting these days. So personally, I'm really excited about it. This is my favorite part of my job, is when there's this huge amount of new stuff coming out in the CPU and GPU spaces. We get it every 2 years or so, where it's just heavy and it's basically nonstop work for at least a month, and then you just, it's cool what we can do with it. So really looking forward to September and October, and make sure you subscribe to catch all that as it comes out. So anyway, that's the rumors and leaks for those. Now there's another leak before we get into normal announcements with Raptor Lake Geekbench scores. Geekbench, we're not too fond of Geekbench. It's not the greatest representation of anything, but it's a number that is assigned to parts, and so you can kind of use it to evaluate the relative stack. So the Geekbench scores for Raptor Lake have results for the 13600K and 13700K, and these have been uncovered by Harukaze and Bench Leaks on Twitter. There are 3 total results between the 2 CPUs. 2 of them are from the 13600K, one from an Asus ROG Maximus Z690 Extreme, and the other from an ASRock Z690 Steel Legend motherboard. And one is from the 13700K on the same ASRock board. The alleged 13600K Asus result comes in at 2012 single core and 16,054 multi-core for points, while the ASRock result reports 1980 single core and 14425 for multi-core. It's pretty wide variance for the same CPUs, but not unheard of with different motherboards. The leaked 13700K with 2 more P cores results in a 2090 single core and 16,542 multi-core score. If we compare against the 2 alleged 13600K scores, that calculates roughly to a 4% to 6% lead in single core and up to a 15% multi-core lead. It's too early to tell which results are more accurate, given that we haven't actually gotten to test these yet. All these results show as valid on Geekbench for whatever that's worth. The previous 13900K result that was making the rounds was not listed as valid. And then as for what we can take away, well, it makes sense we're getting more leaks of Raptor Lake because motherboards for Z690 now have been posting BIOSes for beta Raptor Lake support, so it makes sense that you're going to start seeing this stuff pop up. Next one, EK launches gold-plated blocks in what is probably an ill-advised, extremely snobby, remarkably disconnected from reality PR press release about the gold-plated blocks, where they, well, I'll read it to you. Quote, "Gold is the quintessential symbol of status, power, immortality." What? And wealth, often reserved for royalty. So why not add some to your PC? We must not forget to mention that genuine gold was used for plating all of these products. So it's not a sham. Great. We weren't wondering if it is a sham until reading that line, but now I'm wondering. Excellent exercise in marketing. For anyone maybe in a class about marketing, you should use this marketing as an example of not marketing the negative of your product. You don't say it's not a scam. You should buy it. You say, here's all the reasons it's good, and you hope that they don't think it's a scam. This is a bad start. This is like really, it's almost like the person writing this was thinking, this is the stupidest thing I've written a press release for. It's embarrassing. I feel like it's a sham. So how do I convince people that it's not? I know, I'll tell them. So thanks, EK, that inspires a lot of confidence. Maybe we can do diamonds next. How about we embed them in golden rings and then we put them on the tubes in the open loop? That seems like it wouldn't be a sham either. The company continues with its multi-level marketing language, writing, quote, plus, everyone knows these are good times to invest in gold. Except that it's not, because it's a pump cap or a pump or a water block for a computer. And that means it's gold that's surrounding copper, which at some point will be filled with gunk and other nasty stuff from the loop. And gold isn't normally associated with those things. So this is just, we don't entirely hate the idea as far as how it looks, but I personally hate everything about the marketing for it because it just comes across as irresponsible. EK is trying to tell jokes like, it's an investment, but that's a very irresponsible joke, if it is one to tell, because there's a lot of people who see the word investment and get very excited. This is not an investment, but it's clearly not a sham either, because they told us. So anyway, these are the EK quantum velocity squared line. I don't know why velocity is squared, but okay. And it will include the gold-plated M.2 SSD heatsinks, CPU blocks, pump caps, or covers, and the price is as much of a scam as gold would allow, in this case being $37 for the cheapest part, that's an M.2 heatsink, or at the high end, $210 for an LGA 1700 gold-plated water block. You could buy an entire other CPU for that same price. Up next, leaker Tom APISAK has shared a result from the Basemark benchmark that shows scores from an AMD engineering sample CPU. The alleged Ryzen 7000 series CPU is shown with 4.4 GHz on a Gigabyte X670E Aorus master motherboard with 32 GB of RAM and an NVIDIA A4000 GPU. We were able to find 3 total instances of this system appearing in Basemark's database with minor variations in setup and the benchmarks run. As compared to an Intel i7-12700F result with the same A4000 GPU, the Vulkan score showed a 12,075 point result for the AMD sample and 12,817 points for the 12700F. This is a 6% lead for the 12700F. This doesn't really mean too much, really, because it's leaks and it's one benchmark, synthetic benchmark score, and it's also between an engineering sample and with totally unknown test conditions, but it could also mean that the 12700F is a little bit faster than the 7600X. We'll see when the 7600X comes out. And regardless, the benchmark results leaking tell us one thing that actually matters, which is that we are getting closer to that previously rumored-ish, it's basically an AMD soft announcement of a September 15th or so release date. Up next, AIDA64 software update, giving us some details on Zen 4 and RTX 4090. This isn't a leak, it's just, well, I guess it's not a rumor. This is an actual update that was in actual software that both these companies use. So FinalWire's AIDA64 benchmarking and statistics software has been updated at this point. It has a version 6.75 with support for AMD Zen 4 CPUs and the NVIDIA RTX 4090. The update also mentions enhanced support for AM5 motherboards, as well as detailed chipset information for the memory controller found in Zen 4. AVX 512 and AVX 2 optimized benchmarks will be available as AMD is retaining those instruction sets, unlike Intel's Alder Lake. And software like AIDA64 adding support for upcoming hardware is another sign that extremely early samples are likely becoming available to select developers to make updates like this ahead of the full launch. Up next, Valve's Steam Deck now officially supports 4,044 titles, with 1,980 of them being in the verified status at the time of writing. More games than this are likely playable as validation efforts are ongoing, but this is what's officially marked. So this is evidence of the Steam Deck's continued popularity and so far success with gamers, and a robust catalog of titles is essential, as anyone who bought a PlayStation 3 at launch can attest. Old grudges here at Gamers Nexus. The Deck's official and community support are also responsible for an increase in the attention on Linux gaming as a whole, spearheading a push for game support and compatibility like with Valve's own Proton. We're happy to see this because it's an important step towards giving Microsoft some serious competition in the desktop PC gaming space. It's not just hardware monopolies that are bad for the consumer, like the CPU and GPU companies, duopolies. Now it's a triopoly, is that a thing? But it's also software companies, especially for the operating systems. And Adobe Premiere. Up next, Microsoft is changing its release scheduling for Windows 12 back to something more familiar from many years ago. Microsoft says it's now moving to a 3-year release cycle for an entirely new number on the Windows operating system. This is for a major launch every 3 years. This time, Windows 12 will end up in 2024 or so. For some history and perspective, Microsoft launched Windows 11 in 2021, end of year, following the 2015 Windows 10 initial launch. So that's a 6-year window or so. Windows 8 launched in 2012, though, which is closer to the new 3-year window. Windows 7 was a 2009 launch, again a 3-year window, and Windows Vista had a 2007 launch and was promptly rushed to Windows 7. Windows XP was a 2001 launch with major updates all the way through 2005. So that scheduling would mark Windows 10 and Windows XP as sort of the outliers from the pattern otherwise over the past 20 years or so. And now it's going back to that. So in addition to these major revisions, Microsoft is pushing to a different update pattern for the major revisions, where now they'll have, instead of the first half, second half updates like we've seen for Windows 10 for a little while now, and Windows 11, they're moving instead to an arbitrary update schedule where several times per year, perhaps quarterly, there'll be an update for the operating system based on whatever it is they want to change. And as for Windows 10, it'll reach end-of-life status in 2025. And up next, the FCC is pushing for higher standards for internet speeds. Now the FCC wants the US to have a minimum broadband speed of 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. If you're thinking, wow, what is that coming up from? The answer is 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up. The FCC states, quote, "The needs of internet users long ago surpassed the FCC's 25.3 speed metric, especially during a global health pandemic that moved so much of life online." The 25.3 metric isn't just behind the times, it's a harmful one because it masks the extent to which low-income neighborhoods and rural communities are left behind and left offline, the FCC said. That's why they said we need to raise the standard for minimum broadband speeds now and while also aiming even higher for the future, because we need to set big goals if we want everyone everywhere to have a fair shot at 21st century success. That's why for my fair shot, when I moved out of a house and into an office, I went from 1,000 megabits per second down, 1,000 megabits per second up for $80 to 100 megabits per second down, 100 megabits per second up for $900. Thanks for the fair shot, internet companies. Really appreciate it. As soon as you move from residential zoning to commercial zoning, even though actually my internet is worse, the price goes up over 10 times. If I wanted 1 gigabit, like I have in residential for $80, it would cost me $2,500 a month at an office. Now, technically, they like to make the claim that the downtime is so low that whatever, it's less than, it's online again in 4 hours or something like that. Couple problems here. First of all, that's irrelevant because there's basically never downtime in residential. Secondly, I'd be happy to cut the cost down to have slower return to uptime if it means I can pay 1/10 of what I do now. And finally, the service for business class is the absolute worst, bottom of the barrel service I have ever received from an ISP, far worse than residential. There are fewer people who actually stay at the company. They all rotate through every few months. They continually rip you off. They don't even know what service we have now and then keep trying to offer us the same service. And they take 6 months to actually turn up the internet at your new location because they don't know how to communicate, even though they're a communications company. So we have problems with ISPs. If I ever do a video on one, it will not be unbiased. It will be very biased because I hate them. They have made things very difficult for us. Moving on. It's the reason I review hardware. And that's going to be it for the show this week. Thank you for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab one of these shirts, or go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to get some extra behind-the-scenes writing updates and video updates. And we'll see you all next time.